think that where we were at prior to the pandemic was a growing, a steady spot, but growing. But you think that because of the layoff almost of all the time away from the workplace in, potentially extremely hazardous sectors like the construction industry, that workers were left almost in a position where they were vulnerable?
Absolutely. When we say the progress we've made for the last 10 years, I mean, I'll probably be quite bold. I say we're probably back 10 years. We've probably gone back 10 years. Just people burnt out, not feeling the same. We talk about coming to work and concentrating on the job. People have got so much on their minds at the minute. We can only concentrate on so many things. If you imagine every day, I'll paraphrase some of Tim's material. Tim uses a pie chart. A pie represents an hour of your day. He suggests that even if you're in a really, really good place, with no outside influences, no problems from home, work for a good company with a good culture, as a psychologist, he says for about 5 minutes your mind will just wander off. He calls it away with the fairies. I don't know how PC like this today, but that's what he calls it. So he suggests that that's when you're a good place, and for some companies that's as best it ever gets because humans are humans. But I think when you're in a bad place, your mind can switch off for 20, 25 minutes of every hour. And I mean, I'll challenge that even further. I think the problems that some people are going through at the moment, you can switch off for half an hour of every hour of your day. Your mind's not concentrating on the task you are doing. And if you're working in a high risk area, and we'll use construction. That's all about construction. But we'll use construction as an example. If you're a banksman and your mind's not on the job, is that a wonder? You could be highly trained. You could be highly skilled. You can have all the equipment. You're wearing the right PPE. You've been on all the training courses. But in that moment, if your mind's not concentrating on what you're doing, could that explain why you miss the person who walks in the bad area? So I think we have to look at more than, and I don't think people have gone back as in the attitude towards safety. I just think that the mind is so occupied with outside influence. Now we've got all the troubles that have gone on in the world as well, that people are all talking about. We see on TV all the time. So we fill our head with more and more stuff. So, it goes back to what the company me and Tim got at the moment, to try and help people clear their minds a little bit. And, that's why culture of the company is so good. If you're having a bad time at home and a bad time at work, then you're drinking too much on a weekend and it escalates, and then you come to work the next Monday and you're in a bad mood. You fell out with a wife or the kids, or you've got money problems. You see things on TV. You come into work in this high risk area. So again, I always, we usually think some fatalities on the train line where they look at missed the train. You think, how would you miss a train? But the look at has actually missed a train. He's not seen it because his mind's on other things. And I think it just demonstrates how complex the mind is when we talk about health and safety.
Sorry, I was just going to say on that, because I think what I'm getting from you is that the biggest kind of takeaway from the pandemic is that, in whatever sector you're in, the biggest effect that we had was that on maybe the mind and mental health and well-being. And I think that is probably criminally undervalued, the impact of negativity can have on well-being and mind. And, would you say that that's probably the biggest takeaway coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Me personally, yes. As I say, when you look for something positive that's come out of the pandemic, it's really pushed what we've been speaking about for the last sort of 4 or 5 years to the forefront. That we take it a stage further. I believe we should talk about well-being, health, and safety. That's my personal view.
Right.
It should be well-being, should be fundamental. How your people come to work and how you work people. Go back to culture. That's what this is all about. That's when the manager spots that someone else is struggling in the workplace, or a worker notices his manager is struggling in the workplace. It goes all through the company. I think this is probably the most positive thing we can take from this, that the whole arena of mental health, and not just as a separate issue, it's health, safety. Well, as I say, well-being, health, and safety. And the more we can get companies to appreciate that, when I do my presentations today, and that's what it is, it's a well-being, health, and safety presentation. I give them a safety story for half an hour, go through all the trauma of my accident, and then look at how my well-being maybe had influenced what I did. And we leave the room, and no longer do we get Q&A sessions talking about safety. All the questions after us are around mental health, mental well-being, and people struggling in the workplace. So I know that what we talk about today is key. But goes back to then, what do companies do with that knowledge? So my whole role in my company now is I go out doing the presentation. People say, what can we do next? And I introduce them to Tim, because here's what we can do. You know, we can help you move forward by, it's human error more than safety. Why do people make mistakes? And that could be about production, it could be about quality, absenteeism, presenteeism. You know, I think I'm not a massive stats person, by the way. I brought a couple of stats into my presentation because it just demonstrates. I think the most up to date one I've seen was at that 2018, 2019, the cost of health and safety on the UK economy. I think it's around 16 billion, which is a massive amount of money. Hence why companies spend vast amounts of money to promote health and safety within their companies. I think Deloitte did a study in 2020, the effect, the cost of mental health in the workplace, 46 billion. So it just dwarfs it. And I think nearly half of that is presenteeism. Actually, fundamentally, what we're talking about, people actually going to work not in a great place. So how much good work do you get out of somebody who's not in a good place? Yeah, he'll turn up, he'll probably do his shift for 8 or 10 hours or even 12 hours, but how much quality work does it actually do for you? What's it actually costing you as a business?
So how would you say then, because that's a very big, did you say 46 billion on
46 billion.
So out of curiosity, how would you say then that we tackle the issue of well-being in the workplace?
I do not like some of the phrases. I just think because it becomes that become that poster phrase, and people get, oh, it's another campaign. But you know, it's breaking the stigma. You know, but believe it or not, I've only been openly speaking about my anxiety issues for the last year. I've mentioned it before, and I'll give some pointers to it. But I'm really open with the family. You know, I'm open with everybody I speak to. It drops in the conversation quite quickly. But my anxiety that I still battle every day. But since I've been speaking about it, it's made it a lot easier. I seem not to be struggling as much because I'm more open. I think with any kind of mental health issue, hiding it is the most hardest thing. So for me, it's creating it. It's just dropped in the conversation like a normal part of any other conversation. And when people just say, you know, I'm struggling today, we can help people. It's not about having time off work. I think it's probably the opposite, because especially again, we use construction as an example. In construction, you can't afford to have time off work. You know, we know that construction has got a really bad reputation for a high proportion of suicides, you know, within the working population. But I don't think it's necessarily means that if you work in construction, you're going to kill yourself. I just think the high pressure in construction, you know, the subcontractors, you know, you go to work in a bad place. You know, I think if you look at the amount of the population who spend time off work with mental health issues, it's normally HR, teachers, because they get paid. They're on salaries.
Right.
So when they're having a bad day, they can have that time off, which is absolutely crucial for some people to have a bit of time away. But when you're working on a construction site, you know, if you're not there tomorrow, your job's gone. Someone else has got your job. So you haven't got the time to say that you're struggling. However, I still do believe that just by speaking about it, so even if you're having a bad day and you've got to go to work, just by speaking, you're having a bad day, and it becomes that normal conversation. And
right.
What the sort of evidence from me I'll give to you that you know, I speak about this wellbeing topic in my presentations, and guys just come to me afterwards and open up to me. I had a guy yesterday came up to me after the presentation. He was asking me about what I did for, you know, help me get in my daily battles with my anxiety. And I essentially wanted to tell something. I said, so what's your story? So I haven't got one. And I said, well, you know, is there anything you'd like to discuss? And obviously you give him that space, then it's okay to speak up. He said he had a constant fear of dying. So it started 6 years ago, out of the blue. He's lived a pretty normal life, never struggled with his mental health. And 6 years ago, started this dread at Christmas that he was going to die. It was fear of dying. He says, I've really struggled. He said, I said, who have you spoke to? He said, you. He said, you are it. You are the first person I've opened up to. And I said, well, how do you feel? He said, well, actually, I feel a lot better. I've actually spoke about it. And I think for me, that's where we need this conversation to go, because I think everybody is struggling to some degree. It should just be a normal conversation. So
Yes.
how can we help? We facilitate that. I sometimes wonder. I mean, Sean Tooney, who works with me, he's got his own suicide. So he tried to commit suicide when he was 17, and he talks about how that had affected his life and his work life, sort of hiding it. But then you get some people can be sort of put off a little bit with the suicide story, because they think, well, I'm having a bit of a bad day, but I'm not in that place. So maybe I feel a little bit guilty feeling like I'm in a bad place. So we have to be very, very careful about mental health. And I call it mental well-being. People just having a bad day for whatever reason, a marriage issue or debt, or it could be something pretty small to other people, but to them it's a huge part, it's a huge problem. So getting back to the question, what can we do more? I just think we have to normalize this conversation. That it's not even a special topic. It's just a normal conversation to have. You talk about the football, you talk about we've done over the weekend, the golfing, the thing. Oh, actually, I've had a bad weekend this week. It should just be a normal conversation that fits into the normal day-to-day conversations. We are the best individuals when we're asked the question. Or you can put it on repeat, you can record the answer. If someone asks you if you're okay, yeah, I'm fine. It's the default answer. You could on a recording on the phone, someone actually just play a recording, yeah, I'm fine. Yeah. If someone texts you to the one side and asks you again, if you don't seem fine, you're really, really fine. You tend to see people then open up. It's quite bizarre. We all open up after a little bit of prodding, but when we ask a question as a manager, do we really want to hear that someone's struggling, or do you want to hear people say, I'm fine? Well, at least ask the question, then they walk away.
Well, the thing is, I think that's why you're so important in what you do, Jason, because what you do is you give people a platform to open up, because you open up so kind of bluntly in front of them that people have that they feel almost that weight where they're like, okay, I can talk to someone else who's maybe shared something similar. And do you feel like that's what you can achieve regularly when you talk to people? Because you talked then about that really emotional story you had back.
I really hope so. I hope I create that moment, as I mentioned in one of the previous questions. I feel I do create that moment. I think I'm pretty. After all the years of doing it, I think I'm pretty good at opening that moment. But as I fundamentally say, unless companies are prepared to do something with that moment,
With the moment.
yeah, what do you do next? What are you going to do next? Because if you do nothing next with it, it will be that moment. And I say for some it will last last forever, but for the majority of people, it's just a period of time before they put it to the back of their mind, because they've got so much else going on that, we can only, it's like a bucket up there, isn't it? We can only keep so much in that bucket, and as new stuff comes in, unfortunately other stuff gets kicked out of the bucket. But I mean, I always like going back and doing presentations, a year later or a couple of years later, and people sort of remember the story a little bit. But in that moment, what you've actually done, you've reconnected them pathways in the brain, and they feel the emotion of the story again. So it's always there. It's how do we get the most out of something? So I'm a strong believer. There's no magic bullet. I'm definitely not a magic bullet. I've never claimed to be a magic bullet. I can create a moment. I feel now that what we talk about, the well-being, the health and the safety, it creates that bigger moment where people go, actually, I start to understand why I did what I did. I mean, I say quite candidly now, on the day of my accident, I was let down. Without doubt, it was a rush job. There was no procedures. Was under pressure. It was a 2-hour job. We had an hour to get it done. All those factors was there that what caused my accident. And I said on presentations, even in the early years, I was speaking about speaking up is the answer to it. We must speak up when there's anything unsafe, and speak up and report. But fundamentally, back in my thinking, but I didn't do that. I stopped. I thought about it. I then realised it was unsafe, and I still did it. And it was only the understanding from Tim, looking at why when we're in a bad place, we become more fatalistic.
Right.
I think that is the key to a lot of people. And when I speak about this, and I ask people, I have a scale where our fatalistic, we call it the FI moment. It's called about fatalism intolerance, but my FI scale is not called fatalism intolerance. As you can imagine, it's effort. You know, it hits the mark with people, because when you're in that fatalistic mood, you know, you might know you had training, you might know you've had this thing, you might know you've got the right equipment, but if you're feeling fatalistic because you've got a bad marriage or you go through and you just can't be bothered, is that the reason then people are still choosing to work unsafely? So I do think that becomes that choice.
So the possibilities that could lead people to, even for 5 seconds, be unsafe in their practice could be quite honestly related to something that happened 2 weeks ago from a bad Sunday.
Yeah.
Now that, you know, when you think about it like that, that is
On my fully painted FI scale, which I use on the presentations, because from 0 up to 10, obviously, I even say even for the majority of people, their FI score always hovers about 1 anyway, because you've come to work with some kind of issue from somewhere. If there's a fallout, with, you know, whatever's happened. And then you get to number 5, and most people are admitting to me that's where they spend most of the time. And it's quite frightening, really, but most people are confident to admit that their FI score is around the 5 mark every day. It's quite scary. On Demax, I was number 10. And I say number 10 can be when you had a bad time at home and a bad time in work. I was having a bad time in work, and I was at 5 on a regular basis. Well, do you know what really kicked me over into a 10 on that particular day? Nottingham Forest. And people always laugh, well, what's Nottingham Forest? They're my football team. What's that got to do with being in a bad mood? Well, I was in a bad mood anyway at work. I didn't want to be there. Well, that particular day, we were supposed to be playing football in the FA Cup, and I had to go to work. And it put me in such a bad mood. So when we talk about what can make you have a good day or a bad day, we can talk about bad company, a bad boss, things aren't right. But for some people, it can be something that other people feel really small. How come that? Because we're all you know, we're all human beings. We've all got things that make us tick in the day. And if all of a sudden you're in a bad mood anyway, when you have a fallout with the boss, again, are these triggers that form this fatalistic attitude that you're just going to go, oh, just get it done? And we all know the majority of the time you get away with it.
right.
Nothing happens.
And then that's what keeps you going down that path.
And then, you know, the companies don't think, oh, you know, some companies measure KPIs. I understand the importance of these things, Keith. I understand why they're doing, but if that's what you're relying on to show you've got a good culture, then you're far away from where you really are, because you may have 100 guys on your side, all this fatalist attitude, all at number 5 or even higher on the FI score, working, and just getting away with it, taking shortcut after shortcut to keep up with production, to keep up with these targets. And that's why some companies are saying, you know, the triangle, we had nothing to show it was going to have an accident. All of a sudden, they had a major accident, and they can't understand why. And yet, if you looked at the FI scores of these guys for the last 6 months, guys are struggling with arguments at work, or is it bad culture, or is there's stuff coming from home? Is there and again, a lot of companies say, but we pay our guys really well, as if money. Again, without naming companies, I went to a project where guys are working 12-hour shifts. It's days and night shifts. They're getting very little time at home. And I went to the car park, do a night shift. In the car park are BMWs, brand new Audis, all top of range cars. You go in the canteen to speak to the guys, and you can see these guys are not in a bad place, but just shattered. You know, they're so tired. And you think, so this for me is the start of leading up to an accident where, you know, the guys are getting paid well. They've got, it's not always about money, is it? It's about loving the job you're doing. You know, we can't all leave school and say we're doing the dream job we dreamed of when we were 16 when we left school. But companies can create the right culture and the right environment. People love the job they're doing at this moment. You know, there's that great story from JFK when he visited NASA in the 60s or early 70s, and he saw a janitor sweeping up, and he asked the janitor what was he doing. And the janitor just replied, "I'm helping people on the moon," because he knew his role in that company. So that company had a really, really good culture where everybody in that team feel valued and was part of that team that was putting people on the moon. But I go visit our construction sites where the guys, the labourers doing the sweeping up, do not have that same attitude that that we're building this building together. No, they're just labourers. They feel downbeat all the time. They're going home and sleeping in accommodation, sometimes away from home, away from the families, sleeping in accommodation with 3 or 4, 5, 6 other guys, and then they wonder why they come into work. So how much discretion do they give? So I think the reason I talk so passionate about this is it was like, do you have a light bulb moment in your life? I've been speaking now for 13 years. I think the light bulb moment for me happened about a year ago. And I suddenly realised that this well-being thing, even the stuff I've been talking about didn't quite click in my mind till that suddenly I found that day that that's what drove me to do what I did that day. Why did I have such a fatalist attitude on Dare My Accent where I just thought, I'll just have it, just get it done. What was the point of speaking up? Just get up with that and get the job done, get home. And my reason behind this is, people say there's no case studies to link well-being to health and safety. I think, well, use my story as a case study from 30 years ago, before we even really thought, we talk so much about well-being today. 30 years ago, it was barely mentioned, if at all.